All right. There we go. Welcome back to our coordination circle as part of the Lifeboat Academy 2025 uh, design charrette. We have heard are the proposals from each of the guilds, and now it is time for the coordination circle to weave them together and settle on a plan. So we are just about to engage in the circle. And right now we're reviewing the proposals that have come in. So artwork is continuing on the Connect the Dots Club and the Agreement Circle. It's also gathering lessons learned around engagement and reciprocity that would go into a checklist that other guilds could use. And it is also planning and hosting one retreat on site at the Pharmastery. And research and learning is championing the badges system. Finance and legal is continuing on with a focus on finalizing the legal incorporation. Farm Guild. What's the Farm Guild doing?
Establishing the pharmacery.
Um, right, so articulating the Pharmastery experience. Oh, identifying our baseline, identifying our, what are we calling that? Our limits on capacity limits for farm stays. We were also going to debrief lessons learned from woofers. And keeping on with garden improvements and um, clearing and baselines, evaluation baselines. And then outreach is in addition to ongoing communications. And then is moving forward, we'll call a takeaway capture, capturing all right, so that's a good enough placeholder for now. Hi, Heather.
Hi.
Um, we were just going over the proposals. I've started some notes, so hopefully you can find a link for that. I think I can do this again. Uh, I'll put this in the chat. So that should be, I think that will be a link to the notes. And we're just starting to go around the circle. I guess the circle as I see it is April, Ronnie, Pam, Heather, Roland, me. And so we're just doing kind of a reactions round, responses. And I guess we'll use gathering consideration style. So to get started, no, I take that back. To get started, let's just do uh, general thoughts on the proposals as you're hearing them. and then we'll just keep the circle going and we'll kind of play it by ear from there. So April, over to you. What are your thoughts?
This does seem to cover our main needs, although I have to say, in my mind, acting more out of each guild and sort of the threads that have been connected through time to those guilds, rather than a big overall strategic view of, in all, these are the things that we're seeing are the priorities. So I may be missing something there, but other than that, I think we are covering our main needs. Over to Ronnie.
Yeah, this feels pretty comprehensive to me. Um, it seems like each guild is really focused on kind of what is their work. Um, and it seems really clear kind of what's the domain of each guild, which is a really good and useful thing. Um, and yeah, hearing the proposals and reading this list, I feel excited about the year. So I think that's also a sign that we're moving in a good direction. Um, and I will pass to Pamela.
I am going to exercise my right to be a fly on the wall and continue to learn. And I don't know who's next, so
I think Heather.
Yeah, it's me because been so involved in the one guild. It's really exciting to
Mm,
hear what all the other guilds are doing, and it gives me a much better picture of where we're at, with Lifeboat. So thanks for that, Roland.
Um, yep, I think this covers all of our needs. Um, and I feel like the one thing that I don't know if it's missing or if we'll be talking about it, but it is the interweaving where the guilds either need something from each other or where they overlap. So having that kind of discussion, because there may be some things that one guild needs from another that doesn't figure in the RFP of that second guild. So over to Ben.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I feel like, I mean, it seems like most of those interdependencies were identified in the proposals, and none of them seem like extra special asks. Um, I think that the thing that is always in the back of any kind of planning is uh and there are so many unknowns, we could, for example, I'm really bylaw focused, and things could fall in place, and the actual filing part is really quick if we know what we want to file. So that could happen if we find agreement, that could happen quickly, and then that could cascade into a bunch of other things, or we could continue to find niggling challenges, ditto with outreach and engagement and things like that. That we've got new lifeboat builders who are interested, and they aren't here, and so what kind of engagement are we going to have in that way? And I think that's my only concern is sort of thinking about capacity. Um, we never really know what our capacity is, and how that might change. Or even, over the break, I made the mistake of looking at social media, and it turns out the world is still on fire. And so how those things might influence our plans. But I mean, I think we're doing this feels really good to me. It feels like we've done it the right way and it makes sense and it's coherent. And there's just anytime you plan, the man plans, God laughs. So um, I think, well, let's just keep going around now. We've all had a chance to share sort of our initial thoughts. So I think now is we'll continue to circle and we can start to get into the more particulars, like Roland was pointing out. Are there any areas where it feels like we need to have some conversation about guild to guild relationships, or anything that's sort of niggling in the back of your head about what about this or that? April, over to you.
Um, well, again, I'm pretty unigild centric at the moment, looking at heartwork and philosophy. The fit between heartwork and philosophy and the other guilds, I think is reasonably outlined in the RFP already. And until we get to actual conversations with other guilds, we're not going to know if we're missing anything, or I mean, we're assuming that what we're asking and describing is reasonable, but we need to have feedback around how other guilds see our sense of reasonableness. Um, so really, it's waiting to have more concentrated conversations, I guess, about the lines and the overlap. Over to Ronnie.
Yeah, this year feels different from previous years in that it feels like an extension of what we've already been doing. I mean, the previous years did too, but this year feels like there's so much more clarity and infrastructure in place. So I'm not feeling very wobbly in this plan. I feel it feels doable and it makes sense. And kind of similar to what April is saying, I feel like it's like keep going one experiment at a time. So it's like, okay, when is the next Connect the Dots series? How are we going to integrate recording people's takeaways in that, kind of going through the steps of each process, um, and starting to put these things into action. But I feel like we're starting in a really, really strong place. Um, yeah, that's all I have coming up right now. And I'll pass it to Pam.
And I'll pass to Heather. Is it, or who's after me? I don't have
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
So,
that's Heather's next.
Heather.
Yeah, so my first thought was, yeah, I'm kind of focused on the finance and guild, and we're focused on basically purchasing the land, basically, you know, uh, getting constituted, and however we choose to do that, and land purchase. And it occurs to me that there is a lot of financial need that's quite apart from that that I don't even know about. So I think that my request would be, how are you financing yourself? How are we financing ourselves? And I have some ideas or suspicions, but yeah, I think if we're going to take that on as part of our mandate, we need to have some kind of financial operating budget
Ooh.
and some ideas, for example, on how we're going to fund the in-person gathering in a really practical way. So I'm kind of focused on the practical right now. And over to Roland.
You're muted.
I can tell because as soon as I start talking, there's a little sign at the top of my screen that it prompts me to unmute myself. So you don't need to tell me, it comes up. Um, but I was thinking about the guild makeup, and I'm really excited about the Curiosity Guild or the Learning Guild. And I feel like there's a lot of demand that is cropping up for it. And currently, as far as we know, the membership for that guild is of one and it's someone who is already really heavily invested in and working on the bylaws. And I can see that it is a lot of work. So I'm not suggesting that if anyone wants to join the guild, great. But what I'm wondering about is a little bit like with the hard work outreach connection with the facilitation of the 6 conversations. Um, uh, uh, like, would it make sense? And maybe I don't need to actually spell this out, but sort of work groups to work on the different, because there's the, I'm just thinking that the uh, farm and food, etc. guild is asking for help from the Curiosity Guild for all sorts of different types of tracking. And there's the questionnaire and such with the Outreach Guild, and there's the Heartwork that's also asking for things from the Curiosity Guild. So what does that look like? Is it just sort of ad hoc? People from different guilds, if they're interested, join to help to develop something? Or anyway, that my concern is that there's a lot of demand that's being put on the Curiosity Guild. I think it's a really important and key guild now. And how can we agree on ways of supporting those things? Over to Ben.
This is the problem with a non-coercive system. Because all we can do is we can ask, and we keep asking, and there are places where help shows up and where there's interest, and there are places where there isn't. So and I feel like there's always this chicken and an egg issue, you know, which is, I think, one of my part of my learning around engagement is in part that there are a lot of lurkers. There are a lot of people who express mild interest and uh, people they want to join into something, and there's this tricky balance. No one likes a blank piece of paper, and no one likes a done deal. So you've got to, put together exactly the right amount of information that people feel comfortable, but not too much where they feel like they don't have a part in it. And I still haven't figured out how that balance works. Um, I mean, I think it's a good point, and I don't know what I would love help on that. How do we actually find and engage some people, especially because for me that's I think a really core part of what I hope to instill in lifeboat builders is that ability to think about what would success look like, and how could I track it, and how do we develop more citizen scientists who are not just worker bees that go out and do what they're told, but actually people who can think critically. Um, so I don't know. And that's where I didn't really mention the research proposal, but that's actually an area where there could be help for us because of partners, where there are other organizations that are similarly trying to, how do you pull together a network? And if we're doing that together, then we each have our project. And that's my basic idea with the research project is it's, like Foodlands. We just had a conversation on whatever day that was, Heather, around membership, which is a lot of what we're talking about, engagement and um, could we work on that together? And there's energy there in food lands, and there's energy here, and so yeah, how do we? I think this is part of that the mutual benefits part here is, how do we really figure out where there's a fitting together of mutual benefit? And just some random thoughts over to you, Heather. Oh, sorry, April.
Um, I mean, this brings us back to assets. What do we have? What do we have to work with? Who do we have to work with? How do we match that up? The other thing that's occurring to me is that we're having a sizable cohort of lifeboat folks coming to join us in all sorts of stuff. Is there any way that, I don't know, projects or assignments or interest areas can be matched to folks there, and that this builds into their the education we're offering? It's a step towards more interactive learning and building on some of the stuff we talked about this morning, actually. So it seems to me that we have more of a grasp of a group than we've had before, a distinct group, and we know who they are. We know they have interests. We know that there's intersecting interests. We know that there's a beginning or a burgeoning feeling around mutual benefit and reciprocity. So I'm wondering if there's a way to use that. Over to Ronnie.
Yeah, big ditto. I'm actually wondering if with the lifeboat builders, we make guild participation a core part of the offering.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want to use the word it's a requirement. But it's actually, I mean, being in a guild has been a huge part of what I've received from the Lifeboat Academy, and it's a huge way that I give back. And so if you're in a guild, the reciprocity is built in. So I think instead of saying it'd be great if you wanted to join a guild, be like lifeboat builders join a guild so that they can be regularly putting into practice the tools that we're teaching. Because we do keep running into that pattern of people show up, they do some circles, they receive some support, and then they kind of fall off the wagon a little bit. And so if we really, and it's also just a way of making the reciprocity explicit, that like this is an expectation, and it's an expectation that is, 1000% for your benefit. So yeah, over to Pam.
I think that's quite a reasonable request, or invitation. The one other thing that I was wondering about, in terms of, and this is something that I'm sure you guys have already considered and know about, is the bioregional catalyst or bioregional, no, the Regenerate Cascadia space. And whether or not that would be a space where you would find a mutual benefit, considering that it's here and there's maybe a population to draw on that would be finding something very valuable about the work that's going on here. I'm just dropping that in as a consideration. But I share the disappointment in the lack of continuity with the energy that was expressed yesterday here and not being here. And I think the invitation to commit as an experiment, try this X amount of time, something like that would be something that I would find myself uh, helpful in giving, helpful for me to go to the next step. It would be a bit more of a, I'm transverbal, so I'm not going to try and finish the thought. But thanks, Heather.
Yeah, I'm hearing you, Ben, when you talk about um, a network of people, and I know that Foodlands is part of that network. And when I'm listening almost like in a parallel way, the issues that we're facing here uh, with the academy are identical to what we're facing with Foodlands. So a couple of thoughts is that we don't sometimes, if we want cross fertilization, we don't need to form a new guild or invite people to be part of that guild, but we just have a cross conversation, or we have some space that we can all come together and then maybe come apart is one way of looking at it. And the other is just, I really agree with you. I think we need to do that with Foodlands too. We have all these members, they're not engaged. Invite them to be engaged based on reciprocity. And I think that that's exactly what we're looking at doing with Foodlands. So we experiment with in this space is just completely replicable to other spaces that I am involved in. And not only Foodland, as most of you might know, are organizationals that are based on land-based community farms organizations, but all of those members are also in all the situations. You know, every community farm that I work with is looking at how do we engage people in a ongoing way. How do we look at it in terms of reciprocity? So reciprocity comes up for me all the time, to understand that, to know how we can make that attractive, how people can recognize the value of that. I think is I don't know whether that's a conversation you'd like to convene or whatever. I also know that in Foodlands we've gone for funding again to the Real Estate Foundation. We don't know whether we'll receive that, but a lot of this kind of work could be done within that granting organization. We also have a grant um, pending, which has to do with aging in place, and that has to do with the whole thing of continuity
Mm.
in a community and in a farm, and how do we take care of generation and not say that as you're no longer productive, you have to leave for somebody else who is productive. So I see I see working together really strongly as being reciprocal with the two organizations that I'm key to. Yeah. And over to Roland.
Oh, I wasn't even muted that time. Um, uh, yeah, ha, 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 ha. So I guess the first, I, I'm going to try to kind of paraphrase what I've understood so far as things have trickled and merged. And one of them is starting with the Curiosity Guild, and is it doable? What's being
Mm.
asked of the guild, is it doable? And then I'm going to loop back to the end to what Heather was saying about encouraging drawing uh, um, on different people from potentially from um, fellow organizations to say, hey, I need to talk this through, or this is an issue we're having. I think you're having the same issue. Can we talk? Because whether, for example, the demands that are being placed on the Curiosity Guild, um, uh, how can, with the resources that we have, how can that be dealt with? Is it prioritizing, this we need to focus on, this we do first, and this we need to put last, and whatever we can do. I mean, ultimately, that's what it is. It's whatever we can do. And I thought the discussion around the um, lifeboat builders and the cohort was interesting. And I think I was starting to think along the same lines. And making, and I was wondering about making, so in an interpersonal relationship, for it to be healthy, there has to be, we don't talk, well, hang on, ordering my thoughts. Um, I am wondering about the way that we are talking about non-coercion. Because in a relationship, in an interpersonal relationship, one-on-one with someone, there are agreements that are put in place, and whether or not you're able to maintain those agreements is what keeps the relationship going. Um, I wonder if sometimes we use non-coercive as, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And then people just do what they want to do. And then the things that really need to be done, no one takes them on because I don't really feel like doing this. So maybe there's a way of maybe a different way of thinking about, and maybe it's worth a discussion. Hard work could maybe facilitate something like that. A discussion about what does that actually mean for the organization? What does non-coercion actually mean for the organization? Because I was thinking for the cohort and the light bulb builders that aren't part of the cohort, that the mentoring, I guess this would be for the cohort, that mentoring slash mutual aid, so in some way melding those is part of the reciprocity that's built into being part of the cohort. So so this is free, and what you get and what you can give as payment is agreeing to be mentored to build your skills for your own projects by working on ours. That kind of thing. And I think I'm just paraphrasing. I don't think I'm coming up with anything original, and I'm reframing it for myself. Yeah. So it's sort of framing what reciprocity actually means, and actually saying this is how you can reciprocate what you're receiving from the Lifeboat Academy is by engaging in these things. So there's my comments. Over to Ben.
Um, I was typing, and so the processing is taking a little catch up because there was a lot of really good stuff in that whole round. And I'm trying to think about what to respond to. Um, I'm liking the idea. I also feel, just, sort of full disclosure, expressing my vulnerability. I am always really sensitive about cults, and clearly I'm at the center of this circle, right? And I worry about um inadvertently bullying, inadvertently forcing things to go in a particular direction. And and I think I also, like, really, in the full disclosure thing, I am dealing with wounding that has conditioned me to believe I don't get to ask for what I need. Um, and and actually, even worse, I have had many experiences where when I ask for what I need, I get punished. So that's a kind of a thing that's in the back of my head, which is a limitation for me. I feel um, sometimes I feel paralyzed by that. Like I feel like I even asking it feels dangerous. And and I think there's also this cultural thing. The we talk a lot, Roland and I talk a lot about, people don't want freedom, they want license. Like we freedom requires taking responsibility, having choices and accepting the consequences of your choices, as opposed to irresponsible, like the kind of advertising thing, no fuss, no muss, 30-day guarantee, that's what people are conditioned to want, where we're always consuming, right? We're always taking, and the goal is to spend as little as possible to get as much as we can. And so shifting that narrative, I think this is kind of what I was hearing you say, Roland, or part of it at least. What I was hearing was really emphasizing you only get what you give. Like that's part of the reciprocity is it's not like you get something and then you give something in return. It's actually you only get something when you give something first, right? And sometimes it's ironic and it's the example of you learn best by teaching someone, you know. And that's in my experience, that's part of that cosmic irony is getting people and like investment, you know, the number one resistance to everything that we've talked about with the lifeboat is everyone's over busy. And we're over busy because of structural issues with the economy. Everyone's like floating about here and just trying to keep our heads above water. And then the idea of attending, yes, yet again, some other meeting just seems like more work. So how do we convince people that this is about like investing your time in a way that actually benefits you, that gets you going to one meeting to feel like you have saved you get more energy to do the next meeting more effectively, something like that. So yeah, I think that it feels like there's something really a potential power in that. And how do we unlock that? That's kind of the I don't know that bit. And I'll leave it go for now, but I do want to talk about the research project idea because there's an element of that that's directly what we've been talking about. Like, how do you ultimately, what I want is a switchboard where all you need to do is like say, I need help. And that kind of sends out a call to the right people who then are available for a sounding board. And it does it in a way where we realize we're kind of all getting something as we're giving something. But over to you, April.
Well, having a number of thoughts, I really think what we need is to create a liberating structure around reciprocity. And that goes for everything from uh, the tone, the ask, and the demand of our invitation, to the explicitness around that we operate on reciprocity. Not just you're invited in to do whatever, but to say that this is one of the big cogs of our organization, or this is one of the big what would it be? It's like the thyroid gland of our body, of our organism that allows other stuff to happen and filters some stuff out and keeps us benefiting from all sorts of stuff in our environment. And I think learning to be assertive about reciprocity, it will take care of some of that stuff about not asking for what you need. And it becomes clear over time how you do that in a way that gets you what you need and gets other people what they need as well. Um, I mean, basically, that's what therapy does, but it's a lot longer. And we don't have time to do individual therapy with everybody. And maybe it's not as effective as group therapy anyway. But by having some liberating structures that build this in, then it takes care of a lot of what we've talked about, I think. And I mean, one thing is simply to ask people, what can you offer back? And invite them to get into relationship with us because they get to exercise their collaborative muscles. We're like the workout for the group, right? And for cooperation and collaboration, and a group that you can deeply belong to, where we're all working out in a healthy way. And the ambience of that is just really healthy. And part of deliberating structure will also be to point out that non-coercive does not mean laissez-faire. It's not. It's a boundaried, healthy set of things. And that kind of takes care of the people's wish or people's assuming that they get to do whatever they want. No, this clearly this is not that. People are making assumptions about it. And then when they find out that that's not what it's about, kind of, they may back away, or they certainly don't necessarily take a step forward with that. Those are things that are floating around in my Beano at the moment. And now I'm going to pass over to my wise friend, Ronnie.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to emphasize that reciprocity is based on need. I mean, in the more than human world, when we see reciprocity, it's not based on, oh, it would be nice if. It's based on actual biological needs. So if we follow the metaphor of the Lifeboat Academy as an organism, what does this organization need in order to survive and thrive and expand into the areas that we're wanting to expand for this year? And so I think it's useful to get clear on what our needs are. We need more people in the guilds. We need more people to make commitments to and especially with the Curiosity Guild, we need people who are interested and willing to, the main ask for people in the guild is not even to do things, but it's to participate in discussion and be part of the unfolding. And then together we identify the things that need to get done. And then from there, people can take things on. But I think, and then, and the part of that too is to me, I have some concern around asking the question, what can you offer back? Because sometimes people offer something that's great, but it's not something we need. And it's not going to advance our goals. Even if it's well-meaning and they think it will, it won't necessarily. And then the other thing with that is just follow through. If someone's like, I will make a video for social media and it's going to be great. And it's like, okay, so where is it? Months go by. Whereas if we say, here are some specific things you can do as payment, then we have a way of tracking that. And they have a way of knowing what is it specifically they can offer. So that's not to say somebody might not have some amazing thing that we've never done before to offer. I don't want to close the door, but just thinking about staying in touch with what we need and then making that really clear. Yeah, I will pass it to Pam.
Well, I just continue to appreciate the quality of consideration that's happening here. And under the circumstances, I'm sorry that I can't contribute more at the moment, but I'm truly stuffed up in every way. But I'm appreciating what's going on. Heather.
I should just leave my mute off. Yeah, I thank you, Pam. I appreciate that a lot. That kind of you being here, even when it's not really clear to you, because that's participating. And I was thinking that when you talk about participating in a non-coercive way, it's like us collectively determining what we need, right? Being really clear what we need. And then the ask is not what of this that we need to do are you willing to take on? And even if that's like, I can't do it all alone, let's do it together, let's co-do it or something, let's take turns. It's up to us to figure out how we do those things that we need to do. And I'm kind of a little bit fixated on not sociocracy, that too, reciprocity. Like, I think reaching out to our members and we collectively reaching out to the people, the cohorts, and people who have indicated interest. Um, it's like unpacking that reciprocity. Um, and I'm excited about the possibility of having a webinar, or in Foodlands, we have had in the past fireside chats, is what we've called them, where we take an issue. On our farm, we call them salons. You know, we take just one particular issue and go into it in depth, like the intellectuals did in the 20s in Paris. Um, so that style for me, and that probably is what your conversations are like. I haven't participated in them, but to have that kind of conversation around reciprocity would be pretty juicy and exciting to me. Um, and I just want to say, Ben, I am so much in the same situation I just as you do, is it's kind of like I've been the passion holder, the person that founding organization and whatever. It's really, really difficult for me to ask. I've predetermined that somebody's so busy, I don't want to push them. I don't want to expect anything of them. I want them to kind of volunteer, but of course they don't know that. I get criticism from my inner core group about not holding people that's able to say no. And I know that at our planning process, and I was in tears, somebody asked me, what am I afraid of? And I said, I'm afraid of you dropping out. I mean, this is a lifetime commitment to me. And my fear is that if I push people too much, they'll just say, you know, I just don't have the capacity for this now. I can't, I can't give what's needed. So maybe you and I could be buddies, Ben, and we could talk about that kind of role that we have and give ourselves courage, to actually speak for what it's like you say, if you take fundraising 101, you're not asking people for something, you're giving people the opportunity to participate. And we know this, but it's really hard to practice. Mhm. So it's on to you, Roland.
Um, well, what comes up for me is I was noticing first of all, I was noticing Pam, you were apologizing, and I'm sorry if I made you feel like you needed to apologize. Um, because I'm already grateful that you're here, and that makes me think about if we do see if there's a way of incorporating sort of a request for reciprocity from people who join the cohort, then then it's again a relationship. So relationally, it's not us sort of like hoping that somebody is going to offer something, and it's not us forcing something onto other people, but rather about having ways of being able to be clear about how can we find out what someone's capacity is for reciprocity. Like, is it just as simple as asking, you know, so we already talked about not asking about what people offer, and I totally agree with that. From experience, people don't know what they can actually offer. But and so I guess I'm going to leave it to people who professionally develop surveys, which we have people like that among us. But how do you develop questions that allow for both parties to have a sense of I see you, you see me, and this is what we can offer each other. So that's one of the things that I saw. I feel like I just keep throwing these things out, but I can't do them myself. And the other thing is about in terms of what Ben and Heather were talking about, and I think that the and I always get the wrong term for it, so correct me, but the switchboard. I
Mhm.
feel like the switchboard is trying to answer that, and and the more we work together, the more I feel like you're all my colleagues, and that I can ask you for things, and so. And I think that something like the switchboard helps to develop that sense of, oh, it's not that organization and my thing, but rather that we're colleagues working on something and we can draw on each other. So what are the tools that we can use to start to develop that sense of I'm calling on a colleague as opposed to I'm making an imposition on someone who is completely unrelated to me.
Mhm.
So another problem that I'm just bringing
Mhm.
up and have no solutions to. So I'll pass over to Ben and he'll fix everything.
I will fix it all. Poof. Well, and I too, and I think, Pam, your desire to apologize is exactly why we don't want to ask that question, what can you give? And what Roland is talking about as well is, one of the biggest things people can give us is ask questions. You know, Being confused is actually really helpful to us because we think we're expressing something that's clear. And then when somebody says, that word doesn't make sense to me or whatever, all of a sudden that's like a huge gift. So it's there. I'm thinking of two things. One is, in that sort of strength finder world, the last person you ask about strengths is the person who has the strength, because if it's a strength, you don't even notice it. It's like, well, like breathing is not a strength. Sitting in a chair is not a strength. I can do those things. You only ever think that strengths are things that you can't do well that other people can. And so that's part of the problem when you ask people what they can contribute. They probably don't even, they probably devalue the thing that is the biggest gift that they offer. So this makes me think about the badging, right? That's part of the beauty of the badging system is it starts to make explicit some of those things that people just don't even realize that they're good at. Um, and similarly, a lot of times um, what we fear, asking the question or like saying I need help gives other people, it's what you were saying, Heather. Me saying, I don't know how to do this, I need help, gives other people a chance to show up and say, I can do that, you know, or I can do this part of it. And we think we're adding a burden by asking for help when actually that's part of the reciprocity, right? It's the ironic reciprocity of needing help is what keeps us connected. So I'm taking this actually as a underlining the research project actually needs to move forward because that might be part of the intersection of some of these questions coming together. I'm also aware that we are at time of the amount of time that we wanted to give to this. And what I'm gonna, so I'm gonna, let's do a takeaways round, and we're recording this anyhow. And so we're already starting our first experiment. Wahaha. And but so what I'm going to do is a double round. I find this works really well. One is last thoughts for the good of the cause, and then we'll do a round of takeaways. So any like last thoughts that you want to get out, we'll do that, and then we'll do takeaways. And go and I will start actually with my final thought is I feel like this has been a really productive conversation, somewhat unexpected, and it indicates to me the solidity of the foundation that we're working with. We're not talking the project plans that we have for the guilds make sense, are doable, and this brings up one of those bigger perennial questions, and we've made some progress on it. So this conversation is just sort of underscoring for me the solidity of our 2025 guild plans. So over to you, April. You're muted.
This is the magic wand that will fix everything. And the good thing is that just right here in this circle, we've got the people to do it. We know how to ask questions. We know how to engage with people. We even know how to use charm offensives when we think that'll work. So we've got the goods. It's just putting it together and being open about our fears and maybe our previous failures or whatever, and bringing out more and more questions. And when things get really bad, always resort to the wand, because at the very least it makes me feel better and people laugh at it. So, there you go. That's the last thing about that. And over to Ronnie.
Yeah, I feel really good about this conversation, and it's such a great thing to be talking about at the beginning of the year and not in the middle of the year. I mean, it's fine if it comes up in the middle, but to be talking about it now, I think it's going to give us the really focusing on what we need to to keep moving and expanding in the directions we want to go in. Um, and yeah, feels very generative. Over to Pam.
I took a short interlude looking at the Regenerate Cascadia Telegram site, and I have an understanding that the wheels are grinding in that space as well. And it made me realize that this work is just intrinsically difficult. It's it's so easy to take it on as just as a single person can assume that if something's wrong, oh, it's all my fault. This as an entity for the Lifeboat Academy can assume, oh, you're doing something wrong if this isn't happening. And I think it's just intrinsically challenging work. But I also have the feeling that because the gates are rattling and rocking off the hinges, people are going to be opening up in ways to possibilities, other possibilities, in ways that they wouldn't otherwise. So that whole thing about, what is it, someone's catastrophe, somebody else's opportunity. So I think I'm very, I've always been, well, impressed isn't quite the right word, but I've been heartened by the quality of engagement and conversation that happens in these spaces, and then seeing it manifest in the structures that have been put into place and the possibilities that are already showing themselves. it's such grounds for encouragement, and it's just great to see. Heather, just to lose not to lose sight of everything that is, not just what isn't.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Pam, on everything you've said. Um, I'm thinking that my thoughts are that, um, and I have to get back to my daughter on this, is that I acknowledge, I recognize the times we're in. I'm not in denial of how difficult it is, how damaging it is, how scary it is. But equal to that, I think we have the answer. You know, what we are doing is what we need to be doing. It's kind of like a friend of mine just discovered a book called Fifth Sacred Thing that I read in the 70s of Starhawk, and I thought, yeah, we're there. We have to have these solid alternatives. I mean, it's possible that many people will die in the world, and we need lifeboats. So I guess the worse it gets, the more we need to show up and invite other people to join us. Roland.
Uh, well, I can guarantee that the things that we've talked about will come up again through the year. Oh, but before I go into that, because I got a plan, I also noted, and I think is interesting and encouraging, that we don't really feel a need to talk about the proposals, that they're solid, and that we can move ahead with them. Um, but since what actually did come up is something that we're always talking about, because it is perennially a problem. So then how can we treat it as an experiment? And what's do we use do we so we have we have something in place where we do a reflection on how things are going at every quarter. And so is that a reasonable chunk to to do an AMAC reflect exercise around all these things, like reciprocity and engagement, and the stuff that we've talked about. So what do we want to put in place? What do we want to track? And what do we want to when do we want to talk about them, bring them up again? So I am proposing something along those lines.
Mhm.
Over to Ben.
You are well trained. Um,
I get a token.
you get a token. You get a token, and you get a token, and you get a token. Tokens for everybody. Um, yeah, I think this is all, and this is, and I think multiples of us have hit on one of the things I wrote in one of my Medium posts a while ago is this idea of self-help is part of the problem. And humans are social creatures, and we are only healthy in collectives. And certainly healing is way more possible when and I think that's the thing. We are in a dangerous world, and I think we are in a damaged world, a human damaged world. Uh, and I think that's what we're talking about really is like a lot of these are the expressions of wounding, people sitting back, not taking things on, being afraid of engaging.
Yeah.
Um, these are all signs of wounding. And so yeah, what do we do about it? And I think also, Roland, your idea of the treating it like an experiment, it's like break it down, take the big scary goal. What can we do in a couple months? No matter what we are going to do, we have to do something in the next couple of months, and it's not going to be that, it's going to be that much. So yeah, taking these big perennial challenges and breaking them down. Oh, so actually I got two kicks at the last thought. So my takeaway, I think my takeaway is um oh, I've got multiples. Heather, what you said about actually, and I think April, I can't even tell where it came from. It's pervasive. We have what we need. And we've got what we need. We're doing good work. This is hard work. Keep going. So, and I feel like I want to cry for joy right now. So, April, over to you.
Well, in my life, I need both challenge and support. And that's what I get here, and that's what I get with lots of other intentional working associations I have around things that I care about. And, I'm continuing to seek those things, and I get both of them big time pots of both of those in this group. Um, but also a certainty that this is the group to have those two big pots with somehow, and that this is so important that it needs to continue through time and space with me, and with all of you. Um, I think that would be my last word, that this is life work. This is life affirming work, and that I need all of you around me. And I'm going to keep asking everybody I know incisive questions, hoping that they'll go, oh, yeah, what about that group that you work with? Why do you call it lifeboats anyway? And continue to sow seeds, I suppose. That's it. Over to Ronnie.
Well, the process works. Um, we're on the right track. Keep on keeping on. And every year it just gets better. It gets better, it gets clearer, it gets bigger, smarter, um, in a way that is actually valuing the right things and sustainable. And that is such a feat. I mean, that is a massive, massive accomplishment. And in a way it feels like we're just getting started too. So that's exciting. Over to Pamela.
Well, the image of a turtle crossed my mind. Here we are on Turtle Island, and moving slowly and steadily and surely, and one foot in front of the other. And we don't need to know everything, so I do feel just a very strong attraction and affirmation of anything that brings out our humanness, our real humanness, and that happens here. Heather?
Yeah, wow. Caught off guard, deeply listening to all of you. So just a moment for me to reflect. I'm really happy that I chose to sign up. I was in such debate about whether or not it was a good use of my time. Absolutely a good use of my time. So what I'm taking away is the deep alignment, the way that we can kind of work together, the way that in terms of what we have been talking about is that I have more capacity if it's something that I'm aligned to and that I find reciprocal. So I haven't tapped into, I don't have a bottomless pit, but I haven't tapped into all that I can contribute, given how rich the experience is and how important it is for all the work that I do to be in this kind of circle with you. And I think about the 4 quarterly, I think in seasons.
Yeah.
I think in the agricultural, in the natural world, we have these seasons. And so if we can think of the 4 seasons as a way that we move through the work that we do, and sometimes the energy waxes and wanes, and sometimes we put more emphasis on the growing and then we take a break and that's kind of the way the rhythm I think of organizing in the sector that we organize in the land and food and agricultural sector. And so what are we going to do for this season coming up to spring? Because spring will take on a whole new demand. And I think we need to buy the land. Ben, it's time. It's time for us to secure the land. And that's my takeaway. And it's over to Roland. And he has to unmute himself. But he knows that because it comes up on his screen.
I kept clicking, and it wasn't, I kept missing the button. I was getting more desperate, and the more desperate I got, I kept missing the button. Yeah, and definitely aligning our activities with as part of the family with all our relations. Definitely working with the seasons, and I definitely feel the different energy depending on the season. So yeah. And so my takeaway is I want to treat what we've talked about today as an experiment. And so um, I I'm going to think about which guild would best suit the starting to talk about it. And I will contact that guild and it will be a surprise. So over to Ben.
Well, and I've already done my takeaways, so I'm just going to say next steps. So, hurrah, we have completed our 2025 planning charrette with firm plans. And what this means in terms of next steps is it gets returned to each of the guilds to basically figure out what's the season look like. So now if this is our annual plan, where do we start? What do we start to work on? And the rubber hits the road. And I am very I've always described myself as an apocalyptimist. And as the times get more turbulent, I think we're going to find more openings. And so I'm glad that we've done, and I think that's the other thing too, is it's sort of we are a subsection of the population, a very tiny minority of the population who has been pondering these things and working on these things for a very long time, often in the shadows and against insurmountable cultural prejudice. And I think maybe our time has come where, it was unclear. Uh, I've always been frustrated that I was trying to make the world a better place and the world just kept getting rottener and rottener every year. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? And I think in the end, I think maybe I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just preparing myself for what was to come. And and I feel like I'm among kindred spirits who all have a depth of understanding that is uncommon, um, not unnatural, completely natural, but it's we've worked at it. We put in our time, and I think that's going to be really desperately important now. I feel the same thing, Heather. You're talking about your daughter, and I go on Facebook and I see friends that are just melting down, and rightly so. And I feel so impotent because there's nothing I can say, especially in that context. Like a chat message can't get the complexity of you're right, it sucks, and 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 anyhow, so I feel like I'm just I deep gratitude for those of you here today and those of you who are kind of hovering around the edges, and um, yeah, we'll see where this goes. So thank you very much for all your time and effort and contributions. And and I guess we're going to hang out and have cocktail time now. Are we still up for that, or is it nap time instead?
I need a nap.
Thank
I'm
you very
fine.
much.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Take care.
I need a break too. I don't know if we're going to
Say,
come back after or not.
what is the Sunday? Is there a Sunday event or?
There is a Sunday event, but only Roland signed up for it. So I think that it may be Roland and I doing it like we normally do on our Sunday morning circles. We wanted to do our farm circle is a unique activity that includes some tools from Indigenous Tools for Living. It's the agreement circle, sort of hopped up, and we wanted to share that with folks, but so far there is no interest, so I think that gets canceled.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Good night. Take care.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
All right. Cocktails some other time. You're muted.
Just going to toast you as if I had a cocktail and not cold coffee.
Mm.
You're worth far more than cold coffee. Let me just say that.
Well,
We'll
thank you.
get together at another point. Thank
Okay.
you. Good
All right.
weekend.
Yep. Thank you, and enjoy. And I'm gonna see you on soon.
Oh, I'm sure.
Soon.
Soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.